Hello, BookTube. All right, we're back. We're in my 12K Q&A, and I've been informed, in case you're wondering, I've been informed by a number of you that I now owe you a 12.1K Q&A, and that by the time I do the 12.1K Q&A, I'll owe you a 12.2K Q&A. But we're in part, I think this is 4, and we're going to blast through some of these questions because we're taking way too long. Let's see here. Gerald's Bliss has a paragraph, 2 questions in a paragraph, but we're going to blast right through it. Number 1. You seem to have an endless stream of books coming into Hyde Cottage, but only seem to keep a small number in your permanent collection. How do you dispose of all those unwanted books? And how do you manage the logistics involved, as they must weigh a ton? Does the Brattle send its truck every fortnight? Well, not every fortnight, but the Brattle does periodically come to pick up books. Yeah, and I also get rid of them. I mail out a huge number of books. Number 2, you also write reviews for Kirkus Reviews. Are you at liberty to describe the process to us? Do you approach them for specific titles? No. No, I have a queue. And books just get added to that queue. Or do they just send them? How often do you write for them? And most intriguingly, why are their reviews anonymous? I think their reviews are anonymous in order to throw the emphasis on Kirkus as an institution. Kirkus is a very well-respected institution. As you know, if you read books, then you have seen a Kirkus review on millions and millions of books. They're a well-respected industry journal, a kind of industry journal for industry reviews of books. And in the non-industry journal, the ones that have, for instance, Kirkus and Library Journal and Publishers Weekly don't have to wait for a book's pub date in order to run a review of it, because they know they're being used for bookstore ordering, for library ordering, that sort of thing. So they run it, months ahead of time sometimes. Whereas mainstream reviews do have to wait for pub date, and those are all signed. And I think Kirkus has their reviews unsigned in order to throw emphasis on the industry part of an industry journal. But this is Kirkus saying this, not some particular reviewer. They want all the reviews to be regarded the same, with the same level of respect. Whereas if they were all signed, well, then some readers would inevitably start saying, I like so-and-so's reviews, but not so-and-so's. I think they do it in order to keep the sort of the facade that the journal is reviewing these books. And I like that. As to, you had a lot of other questions? Yeah, they assign me books. Since the pandemic, they're almost all ebooks. They assign me books, and I review what's put in front of me. Most Kirkus reviewers fill out a form saying what kinds of books they're willing to review and what kinds of books they're not. I left mine empty. I'm willing to review anything, so I get a lot of things. And as far as how often do you write for them, I think it's fair to say I write more often for them than any other reviewer in Kirkus history. I think that's safe to say. Okay, Scorcher Svartersticken, I massacre that name every time, has a barrage of questions. Number 1, I don't understand why people say Pride and Prejudice is funny and lighthearted. I love the book, but for me it is extremely tense and reads like a drama. And there was only one single sentence that I found funny. Well, I wouldn't say one single sentence. It's suffused with wit. But I agree, it is a drama. It's very tense. But if you found only one thing in it that was funny, then you're not reading in the voice of Jane Austen, because she has a twinkle in her eye almost the whole time that she's writing it rather. Number 2, before you became vegan, did you like sushi? No. Unprepared seafood? No, I didn't like sushi any more than I like botulism. I don't go to a restaurant and say, can I have a fresh glass of water and also some botulism? Number 3, your thoughts on the anarcho-individualist writers, Lysander Spooner and Max Stirner. I haven't read either one of them. In one sentence, they can be the most lucid person on earth, and in the other, the most naive. The individual and its property was quite enjoyable to read in itself and extremely funny. What did you think about this book? I haven't read it. I don't know much about anarcho-individualism. Number 4, is there a female version of Blood Meridian? I mean, a book that has no merit that every young female likes by default. I've not found women to be vulnerable, the same kind of lemming-like herd think that produces Dude Bro Lit. I've not found them to be vulnerable in that way. If you show me an 18-year-old reader, a reader who's just about to graduate from high school, if that 18-year-old reader is a man, is a boy, I will be able to guess almost down to the individual titles what books they read and what books they like. That's never true for an 18-year-old woman. An 18-year-old young woman, I will never be able to know. So I don't know that there's an equivalent. And number 5, why do dogs like garbage so much? Keep in mind, and here I speak for my four-legged brethren, that garbage is a human construct. Garbage is just stuff that you're done with. it's not fundamentally, it doesn't become anatomically or atomically any different from what it was when you weren't done with it. It's just that you're done with it. And most humans waste a mountain of stuff that no one should rightly be done with. That most humans, in other words, throw away a huge amount of food. And even the stuff that isn't food, that is in what you call garbage, still smells like the food that it was with when it was something that you weren't done with yet. Animals don't know it's garbage, is what I'm saying. There's still plenty of stuff there that is worth smelling, worth licking, maybe worth eating. And you know, most Americans anyway, speaking only for Americans here, if America weren't a country of absolute mind-staggering superabundance, then Americans would go through their garbage for a lot of stuff that they could reuse or eat more of. American garbage would look a lot different. Trust me when I say American garbage in 1955 looked a lot different than it does today. So dogs like garbage because it's really interesting and lots of fun. Let's see here. David Adams says, is there a classical battle you enjoy reading about, either in works of historical fiction or nonfiction? By classical, we mean ancient Greece and Rome, or are we using BookTube's definition of classic of anything older than 100 years? The battles of Alexander the Great are the ones, if you mean the ancient world, they're the ones I like to read about the most, to the extent that we can reconstruct them. I've enjoyed reading Xenophon's Anabasis, but I'm thinking of reading Stephen Pressfield's Alexander, The Virtues of War. That Pressfield book is, I think, one of his weaker ones. You can read it, absolutely. If you like Pressfield especially, you'll want to read it. But if you want to read an Alexander book, if you want to read Alexander fiction, read Mary Renault as well, or before you read the Stephen Pressfield book. I've not read Thucydides or Herodotus, so maybe I should read them first. Okay, it's not a question, but you should read them eventually. At least Herodotus, my buddy, my old schoolmate. Edward Craig says, my condolences. Now for my question. What do you think of Robert B. Parker, both as a book critic and as a Bostonian? He's not all that great shakes as a book critic, but and I don't know how I'd estimate him as a Bostonian. It's interesting to me that you don't ask what I think of him as a writer. I guess I won't answer that. I wouldn't turn down a collection of the critical stuff that he wrote. I wouldn't turn that down. I would read it, but he seemed to me fairly timid as a reader, probably because he was such an endlessly nice guy. And you can't be that. I mean, he was an endlessly nice guy. He was an endlessly encouraging guy to new and established authors. And if you're all things to all people, if you're Mr. Good Times at mystery conventions or in bookstores, you're not gonna be a particularly effective critic, because you're either going to know all these people or you're going to want to know them. That was inconclusive as the answer, I know. Liz Schubert says, what conspiracy theories fascinate you the most? Who is your favorite royal in history to read about? I answered two of these things. My favorite conspiracy theory, the one that fascinates me the most, is the one that's most connected to my life, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, which has had more written about it than almost any other conspiracy, and there's a lot to read. There's a lot of interest there. That's the one that fascinates me the most. And as far as my favorite royal in history, it would probably be, it's a little bit weird, but it would probably be a toss-up between Catherine Howard, who does count as a royal, and Queen Anne. Although I really like reading about the current queen as well. Nico Jamarillo says, hey Steve, could you offer recommendations for smart biographies on the following persons? John Ruskin. John Batchelor's biography had a million reprints. It's really good. It's a really good biography. I'm sure you could find it at a used bookstore. Although I said that about like a couple of books this week, and they turn out to be $90 or $100 online. Which has made Mark and I wonder how many of those books are on the shelves in this place that we think would go for $1 online that actually are $100 online. A Daredevil graphic novel selling for $90. That's crazy. But I would also, for Ruskin, I would also very much recommend his own writings. Who else do you have here? William Hazlitt. There's a relatively recent book. Duncan Wu is the author. Wrote a relatively recent book on Hazlitt that was pretty good. And Walter Pater. I don't know of a readable biography of Walter Pater. I don't have one to recommend. Roger says, what are your thoughts on Catcher in the Rye? It's my favorite book, so please tell me it's good. It is good. It is good. There's no way to deny that there's a mind at work in that book. I need to reread Catcher in the Rye. There's a booktube channel. I think he calls his channel Colorless Wonderland. Again, after Murakami. I'll work on him. But he has a poster behind him in some of his videos of Holden Caulfield in the deerstalker cap. And I think that poster is the cover art for some edition of Catcher in the Rye. And I love the poster. So as silly as it is, I want that poster as a cover for Catcher in the Rye when I really sit down and re-examine the book. So I need to find that or maybe make it. But it is good. Yeah. Your favorite book. Might want to get out more. I could recommend books you would like more. Let's put it that way. NP Hunt says 12 nay becomes 12 yay. Let's see here. A barrage of questions. Is The Love Letter by Kathleen Sheen really worse than The Handbook for Mortals by Lani Sarum? Is that really possible? It is. It's the worst book ever written by anyone in the entire history of the human race. You often mention common first novel problems. What are the most common and most irritating mistakes authors make with first novels? They have changed. Those mistakes have changed. In the 20th century, the most common first novel problems were inability to step back from your own narrative, usually that you've been working on since high school. So there are long scenes that you're just not questioning if they belong there, but they don't belong there. You're giving way too much emphasis to trivialities. Also, an extra floridness of prose that usually writers get it out of their system and they don't write like that anymore. Writing like a high school student. That's when most debut novels get their first origin, is in high school. And if any remnant of high school writing has remained in the debut novel when it's published by Knopf when you're in your bourbon binging 20s, then that's a first novel problem. In the 21st century, first novel problems have changed completely. They aren't that anymore. Those things are still there. But now first novels are created, they're born in MFA programs for which the person pays through the nose so that they view their teachers as their employees. So they're not given any kind of hard advice. And their classmates who are supposed to workshop their work, in the 20th century, that's how it worked. Your fiction was workshopped. Their classmates in the 21st century know that that workshopping can only go so far, and it's a very short distance. And after that, you'll get canceled. You'll get called a bigot, you'll get called a sexist, an Islamophobe, a transphobe, if you say that such and such a character is unconvincing. In other words, in the 21st, again, I'm not going to stem line, but in the 21st century, all young writers on the verge of becoming debut authors already think they are the greatest writers who have ever lived. And they don't think that because of an isolated delusion, like the kind that Norman Mailer had 100 years ago. They think that because they've been told that by their employees. That you are, in fact, the greatest writer who has ever lived. And so you get one gigantic pile of steaming wet wash lumped into the reading public after another in the 21st century. Because that validation machine is now unbelievably strong. And it goes back all the way to when they were taking elective writing courses in high school and being told by everyone on pain of social media cancellation that everything they're doing is perfect. So now first writer problems are very different. Let's see here. Despite your love of Tolkien, you always recommend Seamus Heaney's translation of Beowulf above all others. Is the Tolkien version bad, or just a preference in style, or do you have a personal link to Heaney that makes it more nostalgic for you? Second person in the history of this channel to suspect there was a link between me and Shay Heaney. But not just because we looked a lot alike, but you're going way too far into the extremes here. The Tolkien translation doesn't need to be bad for Heaney's version to be better. Seamus Heaney's version is clearly the Beowulf translation for a century. It's just a monument of the translator's art. So it takes precedence even over other translations that are good. Even Burton Raffles' translation is good. But the reason I recommend the Seamus Heaney translation is because it's just much better. That's all. How does Max Porter's newest book about Francis Bacon compare to his previous two? I loved his first two, especially Lanny, but I don't think I've heard anyone even mention the latest one. Isn't it odd? It's gone right off the radar. I thought it was fascinating, but no one has mentioned it, which is really weird. I often wonder, in a case like that, what the author must think. And lastly, when are you going to do a drunk Q&A and tell us the full infamous Moose story? You come over to Hyde Cottage with the cameras off. We'll have wine and calzones, and maybe I will tell you the Moose story, although probably I'll just spend the time cooing over Frida. Let's see here. How are we doing for time? All right, we're fine. Kevin J.N. says, I notice most of your library tours have books containing bookmarks. Do you try to get a new bookmark with each new book acquired? I don't make a point of it, but I always put a bookmark in a new book. A bookmark that I already have. I always put a bookmark in them so that I'm not scrounging for something. If I pick that book up at random, I don't have to go scrounging around for a bookmark. So I always do that to the limited extent that it needs happening. Now, ebooks bookmark themselves, so I don't need to worry about it. But I try to put a bookmark in every new old acquisition of a book, because if I don't, I know perfectly well I'm going to reach into my pocket and pull out a $10 bill, because it's the most convenient thing that's the perfect size for a bookmark, and then I'm going to forget about it. I have no idea how much money is in my book collection. I don't want to do that. So Maximus Setish says, Steve, would you be able to recommend any biographies of U.S. President William Howard Taft? Well, there was a biography 100 years ago by a guy named Pringle. A 2-volume biography that was well received. It was reprinted. It was made into one of those leather-bound presidential biography collections. It's the most comprehensive thing, and there have been lots of splinter studies and little books, but Taft hasn't had a modern version of, for instance, David McCullough's biography of Truman. He hasn't had that, which is amazing. He really should. Let's see here. Thunder Turtle says, how do you manage to stay so handsome? Clean living. And question number 2, would you consider making a video how you analyze a book? Perhaps a past review you did. I did a couple of books on how to review. If you type into YouTube, if you go to YouTube and type in Steve Donoghue book review or review, there are a couple of videos that lay out my process. Some of it, anyway. A lot of you said you would like to see a 3rd video on book reviewing, so I'll add that to the list for 2022. Treeforge says, the majority of popular books that are sold at supermarkets are thrillers like James Patterson. Why do you think thrillers seem to be so much more popular than every other type of book? They require less effort. You can enjoy them right away. They're not asking you to work at all. They just want to please you. They are popcorn movies. It still takes a good deal of talent to write something like that effectively, but that's the reason why they're popular. Because some people they don't want to work when they read. It seems unbelievable to me. It seems alien to me. I'm sure it seems alien to most of you, but some people don't want to work when they read at all. And that's the perfect book for the kind of book for that sort of thing. Trip says, what do you think about the pre-Raphaelites? I love them. I love reading about them too. Upper Norwood says, do you think are bad reasons for reading? Do you think there are bad reasons for reading or having a goal of reading many books? Only if, well, the goal of reading many books, what's bad about that is if that's the only reason you're doing it. If you're just knocking things off in order to make a goal, then you're operating on a bad motive. As far as bad reasons for reading, there are some. I'm sure you've encountered some of them. Some people read in order to lord it over others. That's a bad reason for reading. Some people read only to confirm their own opinions about things. That also is a bad reason for reading. John Voto says, what do you think about Robert Dallek's JFK biography? It's pretty good. How about his books on FDR and LBJ? I don't have much appreciation for the LBJ, but the FDR I liked. And the paperback has my blurb to prove it, so you can feel free to add that paperback to your Steve collection. Let's see here. Marcus Stefanci says, I don't know if you addressed this in a previous video, but where is the best of list for 2021? Yes, that caused a bit of a problem at the end of 2021. At the end of every year, I make a list on my literary blog, Steve Reads. I make a list of the year's best and worst books. And for a few years now, that was on Open Letters Review, an online literary journal where I'm one of the editors, until I realized, very belatedly, that such a list does not speak for the other editors of Open Letters. Obviously, it speaks for me. So I moved my blog onto my website, stevedonoghue.com, which has a vast, vast body of Steve Donoghue writing, with a little more all the time as we slowly port things over to there. I realized right away that that's where the list should be. So they moved to stevedonoghue.com, and a lot of people couldn't find them, and even though I was trying to put the word out. So the link to stevedonoghue.com is on every video, and that's where you want to go to see those lists. Let's see here. Chrisam70 says, what are your thoughts on Proust in Search of Lost Time? It's so profound. I intend to do a read-along for Proustuary. Then we'll find out together. WH says, what do you think about Walter Isaacson and his biographies? I generally like them. I think there's some that are weaker than others. I loved, like everybody else, I loved his biography of Steve Jobs, of all people. Just thought it was a totally gripping reading experience. Didn't like his Ben Franklin biography. Didn't really like his Einstein biography. Didn't really care for his... well, I've liked some and not liked others, but I highly recommend the Steve Jobs book. That was a classic. Jonathan McKnight says, "Have you ever been to Northern Ireland?" And then Chiana Nicole says, "Ah, a newbie." Ask him how he likes Northern Ireland. I believe he lived there for a bit. I did. I lived in Northern Ireland for a time. I lived on the west coast of Ireland for a time, very close, in fact, where Jason Harrigan lives right now, or did live once upon a time. Proving that all the sexiest booktubers have had some sort of interaction with Carrick. But I did visit Northern Ireland, yes, and I visited many times. I lived there once and loved it. Absolutely loved it. Let's see here. Laura Wincello says, "Hi, Steve. Did John Adams's The Noble Revolt change your opinion on anything regarding the outbreak of the English Civil War?" Not really, no, but I loved it. It's a fantastic book. I shudder to think now how much it would cost on eBay. It's the only thought that we've had now in the house here in the last couple of days, since it turned out that, what were the two examples? The Daredevil Born Again graphic novel is obscenely expensive. And there was one other book, I forget what it was. There was one other book where I just mentioned it, and it's obscenely expensive online without any idea why it would be so. No idea what that book would cost now online, but I liked it very much. I strongly recommend it. And also, do you have any favorite Cavalier poets? No. No. Mary Tumblety says, "Will 2022 be the year you start saving your videos in playlists such as your comics, science videos, ancient classics, modern classics? It would help folks to find some of your videos." I know it would. It's time consuming, and there's no payoff for me. It's just tedium. And I have shaped my life I know this is going to sound really terrible, but I've shaped my life in such a way that I don't deal with tedium anymore. I've eliminated it almost entirely from my life. But I recognize once you have 5,000 videos, playlists are kind of essential. And I should do that. I know that I have never done it. I've never made a playlist of anything. But I know there are hundreds of Steve Donoghue playlists out there. People do make them. It seems like a natural response to having so many videos to wade through. But I should do it myself. I just haven't done it. Maybe this year, maybe 2022 will be the year. Flora Should Be Reading says, "Hi, Steve. Well done on becoming a 12K influencer." Thank you. 3 questions for you. Number 1, what's the latest on the Proust read-along that you mentioned last fall? I believe you're referring to Proustfebruary, which was always the intended time, was February of 2022. That was always the intended time. Perhaps you watched those earlier Proust read-along announcement videos and misunderstood them. But it was always going to be February. Number 2, what is your favorite Euripides play? That's Cadmus. I took Deb to see Cadmus. It was a boiling hot day. Of course, she had to go to the bathroom all the time. And we ended up fighting. But it doesn't matter because it doesn't survive. We watched it back in 4th century Athens, but it doesn't survive, so you wouldn't know what I'm talking about. It was really good. Then number 3, what are your thoughts on the Russian-Ukraine situation? I've been watching it in the news. Every night here at the old house in Vermont, we watch the PBS NewsHour to get updates. And I also follow it a little online, and I do not understand why Ukrainian government officials are trying to reassure the West that this situation has been blown out of proportion and that there isn't an imminent threat from Russia. I don't know why a Ukrainian official would say that when it's manifestly true that there is a possible threat from Russia. I don't know why they would say that. I'm trying to figure the motivation for that out. But I called this scenario a long time ago. The West does not have the will to defy an old-style, militarily aggressive territory acquirer. The West simply doesn't have the will. If they had had the will towards this particular militarily aggressive territory acquirer, they would have stopped him the last time he tried to acquire territory, but they don't. The West doesn't have the will. And I'd be willing to bet that Putin knows that. That he knows that if he runs tanks into Ukraine or one part of Ukraine, no one will stop him. There won't be any reprisals. I'd be willing to bet that he knows that. But we shall see. I am watching the situation tensely, to put it mildly. Let's see here. William Fett says, job well done on reaching 12K. I know that TLS is your favorite book review magazine. What others rate high on your list? What are your thoughts on the writings of Robert B. Parker? There's Robert Parker coming up again. Well, the ones that come up on my list, the natural candidates, the New York Times Book Review, the New York Review of Books, the London Review of Books, Claremont Review of Books, the LA Review of Books. But for the ones that aren't dedicated, I also, as I've mentioned on this channel many times before, I like the backs of other magazines. The backs of political and commentary magazines will have a separate section for book reviews, and some really great work gets done in the backs of those issues. So, and Robert Parker, I have never been the biggest Spencer fan. I think the books are thin. None of them have ever struck me with any kind of weight or intelligence or anything like that. I know he has dedicated fans, and I know that a lot of those fans loved him as a person. He was a lovable guy. But the Spencer books have just gone right past me. I wish that weren't true, because there are a lot of people out there who love them. David Wiley says, what is your favorite historical period to read about? Favorite battles to read about? Favorite Icelandic saga? I don't think I have a favorite Icelandic saga. And obviously, if you go by sheer number of books read, my favorite battle to read about is the Battle of Gettysburg. And favorite historical period, I don't have one. There are a bunch: the Italian Renaissance and the Northern Renaissance, the Tudor times, the ancient world of Republican Rome. Those sorts of times always trip my trigger. Oh, we're almost ready. Let's do a couple more. Oh no! All right, Harrison Recht has a barrage of questions. He should carry us to the end of this one, which I think is part 4. Congratulations and condolences on 12K. Number 1, do you enjoy Rebecca Fraser's books? How well does she carry on the family business? I do enjoy them. Yeah, something in that family. They all have writing ability. Number 2, do you recommend Taylor Branch's huge trilogy on the King years? I do. Yeah, they're quite good. And number 3, what are your thoughts on Galsworthy's Forsyte saga? I like it. I like it a lot. Well, that was easy. All right, we're still going to finish up here, so we'll start another one.